Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending our last of the three webinars that we've had of the Kansas Disability Caucus 2024 Winter Webinar Series. We're going to give folks just a couple more minutes to log on, and then we'll get started. Thank you all for being here. All right. So welcome, everyone. As I mentioned, this is the Kansas Disability Caucus 2024 Winter Webinar Series. Today's presentation is called Advocacy, Become the Power of Change. And we are delighted to have our presenter, Shari Coatney, who's with the SKIL Resource Center. And then I also wanted to highlight today that our webinar is sponsored by CareSource. So we are very gracious to our sponsor with them so that we could do this webinar. Thank you. All right, and so before we begin, I just wanted to highlight a few accessibility features. Today's call is being live captioned by Jane Piles. You can turn on captioning by clicking on the CC button in the Zoom toolbar. You'll see Show Subtitle, which turns on the captions. And in that same location, you can adjust the size of the captions to meet your needs by selecting subtitle settings. And then we also have sign language interpreters on the webinar, Jolene Benham and Trina Schwartz. And we are using gallery view in Zoom to see the presentation, speaker, and interpreters. So if you only see the presentation or one video, go to the top of your Zoom window and move your cursor on the green bar at the top that reads View Options. And click on that arrow and make sure that you are in side-by-side gallery. And then a couple things for question and answer facilitation. So to ask a question, we ask that you use the question and answer button in the Zoom toolbar. If the question and answer box is not accessible to you, you can click on raise hand. And if you are joining by telephone, please press *9 to raise your hand. When it is time for questions, I will call on you to unmute your line so that you can ask your question. And we encourage participation throughout. Shari did mention that she wants this to be interactive, so please feel free to ask questions at any time. And do not use the chat feature to ask questions to presenter. And questions will be answered in the order they come in, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. So those are kind of just the things that we wanted to describe for accessibility features. So now I want to introduce our presenter, Shari. So Shari Coatney has been working for the rights of people with disabilities at Southeast Kansas Independent Living, or SKIL. She has had the pleasure of serving as the president and CEO of SKIL for 30 years. She grew up with a learning disability and has had a lifetime of overcoming the obstacles of attitudinal barriers. Her lifetime of experiences has made her a very passionate advocate. So thank you very much for joining, Shari, and I'll turn things over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for choosing to participate today. And as she said earlier, I certainly hope this can be interactive. And if you have questions or things to say or just comments, please just do that. So I think that I always do better when I can feed off of folks from other, throughout the process. So I am from SKIL. However, my passion comes from a lifetime of experience. But I had the SKIL logo up there because that's kind of how I start my presentation. So go ahead and move to the next screen. And the PowerPoint really is just so you have something to look at other than me. So I think we'll just start with the question, what is advocacy and what does that mean? And I think that to me, advocacy has meant many different things through my lifetime of experience. And I think that it means something different to many people because it depends on where you are in life and what the situation is and what is advocacy. Because I think many times we learn what advocacy is. We start with self advocacy. We start by learning how to stand up for ourselves or um, how to overcome barriers by educating others around us about the situation and about what we need or how to communicate with us in the best way or just expectations of others. Sometimes advocacy is just overcoming the expectations that others have of you, and so that people can see you for who you really are and not what they think you are or what you should be able to do. And so and then advocacy becomes more than that. It becomes about realizing that when you're making a change for yourself, that you have an opportunity to make that bigger and to advocate for change for all people who may be in a like situation. And I think obviously there are many types of disabilities and there's many types of advocacy. So I think as individual as each of us are, sometimes advocacy can be almost that individual as well. And I think that the most important thing about advocacy, the number one thing that I hope that we can take away from this training is that it's just important that you do it. It makes change happen. And without advocacy, nothing changes. Things just remain the same. So it's just realizing that today I hope that I can plant the seed to make you understand that advocacy has to happen. It's not something you can sit around and wait for somebody else to do. It takes all of us to make things change, to make us even aware of what needs to change. It takes people standing up and saying what needs to be changed, and then working together to figure out a plan to make that done, to get that change, because we're not in it alone. If something is affecting you, it's affecting others. And I think that I get real passionate about advocacy sometimes because I feel like there are so many people who are suppressed and afraid to stand up for themselves or to take on an issue. And so I have that desire to get in there and just change it for them and to give them the power to stand up for themselves while breaking down the barriers that are in front of them. So anyway, so I think we can move on to the next slide because I can just sit here and talk all day. So in independent living, federally, it's required to do advocacy, and there's two types of advocacy, and it's systems advocacy and individual advocacy. Systems advocacy is an effort to implement local policy and legislation. Does it make systems change or done to make systems change on a larger scale for all people with disabilities? So systems change usually is when we're working with policymakers of some type. So system change can be when you're advocating for notifications at stoplights. So people with visual impairments can, in fact, have notification on when it's safe or not safe. And I live in rural USA, so that's a big deal. I mean, people don't always think about everything, and you would think after all these years of the ADA being in law that they would, but they don't. So systems advocacy can see something that you're working with local governments to make a change, but it's about their policies, it's about their implementation of services. It can also, of course, be about passing legislation that we need to break down a barrier. It can be about changing policies currently in the state, and this is a small one, but it needs to happen. So we need to be advocating with KDADs that the Older Americans Act allows people to self-direct their care. It is simply a policy change that needs to happen, a simple wording in a policy that needs to change to allow people who receive their services through the Older Americans Act to be able to self-direct their care. We've known this for years that this needs to happen. It's just not a big enough issue because there's so few people on Older Americans Act that it hasn't taken fire and taken off to where it needs to be addressed. But that is a system advocacy. It's something as simple as working on a policy. And then, of course, there's the federal government and the federal changes that we have to make. And so, how does anybody know all of those things? How do you possibly know? And, we can't do it individually. One on one, we don't know what we need to call a legislator about. One on one, we don't know what policies in the works or what funding is coming up when to need to be reinvest, so they need to reinvest in or eliminate or whatever the situation is. We have to do this together. We have to divide to conquer. And I think that's important for senators to know, but it's also important for individuals to know that we need to identify who knows what's happening at the federal government, who knows what's happening at the state government, who knows what's happening at the local level or the county level. I mean, you got to identify people or figure out what role you're taking, what places that you can do. I mean, I haven't got the means to go to Topeka on a regular basis. So I'm going to take on what's happening in my county or what's happening in my region. You know, that's okay. Just figure that out. And maybe you don't even have the ability to do that, but you can write letters or you can send emails or you can make phone calls when you're on an alert. And I think that's important. I mean, whatever your comfort zone is, just get started. Just figure out your piece and make that happen. The other advocacy is individual advocacy. And individual advocacy is when people have a barrier that's affecting them individually. And generally, when we work on that, so recently, I was working with a foster kid who the state's changing things. So this little foster child couldn't get their services from a provider because of some stupid rule that somebody who probably has never worked with foster children or possibly never worked with people with disabilities and maybe is new, obviously, new to their position at KDADs. So, or maybe all of the above. I don't know. But for whatever reason, they were putting a roadblock up for this individual. So we had to get involved and we had to advocate and educate and advocate and educate and get a little angry and anyway, to remove that barrier. It finally happened. But when you change something for an individual, generally it's a domino that starts to fall. And then if something's broke for one person, it's probably broke for more people that you don't even know it's broke for. So you know that individual advocacy many times turns into a systems advocacy that happens indirectly. Individual advocacy, though, is assisting individuals with their human rights, housing, accessibility, guardianship, education, just so many things. Sometimes it's just helping an individual against their own, with their own family, not against their, with their own families to make them understand, working with people with intellectual disabilities when they are transitioning into adulthood. Sometimes that's some of the hardest advocacy that you can do is when you're working with a family who just cares so much about that individual that they're trying to protect them. And they overprotect them to the point where they're not allowing them to grow into adulthood. And so having to get involved and figure out that advocacy tool that's going to work with that family to help them develop a way to let go a little and let go a little and let go a little. So that person can end up being independent. It's a level of support with the level of support that they need. And that's a scary thing for families. So figuring out how to do that delicately. But individual advocacy is something that's done, and every single time it's very individualized. There's not like, here's the scope of work that you need to do advocacy. It just doesn't work that way. Okay, next slide.
Yeah, and Shari, this is Kelsey. I was trying to kind of monitor the chat while sharing the slides, and that was giving me a little bit of difficulty. So if it's okay with you, I thought we could just take a little pause and kind of ask if there's questions
Yeah.
from the audience. and if anyone wants to raise their hand, we can also call on them.
That'd be
I was
great.
getting notifications that some folks had raised their hands, but then I didn't see where they were still raised. So let's give a little time. If anyone kind of wants to talk to Shari or ask a question, please use the Q&A box at the below, and we definitely want to hear from you and have a conversation with Shari.
What we decided to do, yeah, what we decided to do was after they met the threshold, what their last paycheck was.
And we'll give folks just a little bit of time to do that before we move on. I'm not seeing any hands raised right now, but please do virtually keep it up. If keep your hand up.
Something
If
popped in about equality, but I don't know what that was, but maybe it just popped on my screen. It was just a notification.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm not seeing anything in the
Okay.
Q&A. But if you are, please do read it and respond.
It could just be something totally not. It's only popping on for a second and then gone. So I don't think it's. I just think it's my computer. Sorry about that.
It's all good. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any hands at this time or questions in the Q&A, so I'm thinking we can continue, and then when we kind of have another break, I can give things a check and we can continue on. Thank you all for your patience. All right.
Okay, so I forgot to describe myself, and I apologize for that. So I'm a middle to older age white woman with blonde and gray hair, mostly silver around my face. I'm wearing, you can't really see my clothes in this, but I'm wearing black. It's pretty much my signature color. I always have black on. And behind me, I'm sitting at my desk. So behind me, there's a artwork by Skip Smith of me and a gentleman in a Uncle Sam costume. We called him Santa Claus because he came to an event of ours, and that's a portrait of him and I at that event. So anyway, sorry about that. I apologize for those who I may have neglected to do that with. So the next slide is, why is advocacy important? And then on the side, it says, fight for those without your privilege. We are people with disabilities too. So it's just like a framed poster like slide. So I think that why is advocacy important? Because if we don't advocate for the things that need to be changed, and so many times I've been around for so long, you see things reoccur. So, I think that it's important to always have our guard up and always be watching for those things within our systems, within our support networks, and within our community, within our law, the law of the lands, to watch as history repeats itself, but to always be vigilant to fight for those things that are important. And a lot of times I say to folks when I'm training is, what's important to you? I mean, what matters to you? Just, take a moment and think about what really fills you with passion. What thing do you know that really is important? So I'm just going to throw it out there. Waiting list. So we're so fortunate to live in Kansas where we have HCBS waivers and where people can have supports in their home. The same supports that they would be able to get in an institutional care and more. So, what a great place to live. And that was so true when it all first started. And then they developed this issue where they ran out of money, so they have waiting list. And how do they manage the waiting list? And what are they going to do? And how long is too long? And here we are with people waiting years to get services. On the IDD waiver, they're waiting, I mean, up to 9 years at this point. And on the PD waiver, they're waiting, 2 years. And that's not okay. And, so when I think about people who have been assessed, who have come up and said, my pride's aside, I need assistance to be able to live independently in my home. And the bureaucratic system says, okay, you meet your qualifications, but however, we don't have the money to support you, so you're going to be put on a waiting list. And it could be, umpteen years, before you get your supports. And people choose then not to go to an institution because it's important to them to be able to remain independent. And we just put them on a shelf and they wait. And that fills my heart with passion because it pisses me off. What a broken system. And it's a great system until you get to the point where they run out of money. Well, we got to have a better system than that. And then there was, the Olmstead Act that happened after the Americans with Disabilities Act happened. That got passed. It was wonderful. But then it started applying to equality. It always applied to that. But then they realized after the Olmstead decision was made with the Supreme Court that if somebody's living in an institution, they should be able to have the same services in the community in a least restrictive environment, which would be in their home, in the community. And so that happened. And yet states did not develop a plan to address the fact that people, the baby boomers, were going to be coming into the service system. And what's our plan? What are we going to do about it? And what are we doing about the fact that, people aren't dying off as they have a disability. They're living with their disability. And so what's our plan? How are we going to meet the needs of these folks? States just didn't take in the time to develop that plan, even though there were many of us self-advocates out here who were willing to work with them on developing an Olmstead plan for the state of Kansas. They didn't do it. So their plan is that people are on a waiting list and they go to the legislators and they ask them for more money with no plan. Just give us another million and we'll see how many people we can serve. No plan. And we've got money for the waiting list, and that's wonderful, but we never get enough money to make a huge difference in the waiting list. And so that fills my heart with passion. It pisses me off. And years ago, when Sebelius was the governor, SKIL filed over 500 Olmstead complaints. And we sent a copy to the governor. We sent a copy to all the legislators at the federal level, state level. But of course, we sent it in to the Department of Justice. Department of Justice made it to Kansas to look at those complaints at the beginning of the Brownback administration. The Brownback administration made a deal with them that when CanCare came into play, that was going to eliminate the waiting list and people would be served. People would get what they needed. Well, here we are. CanCare has been in place for quite some time. Brownback has left. We've had a new governor. And here we sit with these waiting lists and no Olmstead plan in their state of Kansas. So, it makes me mad. But I can't do it alone. And, we used to know who was on the waiting list. We had those lists. So, we had the list. It was easy to go approach people on the waiting list and say, hey, let us help you file a complaint because it's not okay that you're going to have to wait for services. And
hey, Shari.
Yes.
I think this is important for other people too. I did notice that Colin had raised his hand, so I'm gonna kind of switch my screen a little bit so I can make sure that we get Colin's hand unraised. And let me do that really quick. So Colin, I'm gonna I just said that I allowed you to talk.
Okay.
And,
yeah. Well, hi, Shari.
Hi.
I was wondering, as you say, file the complaints and stuff, and when, in your opinion, should we bring it to the level of filing a complaint?
Should we?
Like,
Yes. We should be filing complaints all the time. I mean,
like,
how are people not angry that the waiting list is 9 years for our brothers and
oh
sisters with
yeah,
mental health
yes,
service?
I know that, but like, let's say you're just like out of high, like, should you do it like, like, should you do it daily or something like
Oh,
that, or like,
oh no. To file an Olmsted complaint, there's really just a form that
yeah,
we fill out, kind of tell the person's story along with that.
yes, yes,
And then we send it to the Department of Justice. And one complaint usually isn't going to get much attention, but multiple complaints about the same thing. And I don't think we have to have 500 or some. I mean, that was just because I told my staff, all of them, to go
well,
file
yeah,
complaints, and they did. And I actually got to do a training at a caucus on how to file complaints. So that also boosted those complaints. So I think that
like
it's
how
just
much squeaking, like how much squeaking gets the grease, I guess, is what I'm saying,
well, I
what
think
I'm
that,
asking.
yeah, I think that this depends on the people in charge and what other issues are also in their plate at the same time. Just like, I mean, they are humans. And
Mm,
so when they came down to SKIL, um,
mm,
they showed up here before they showed up at Brownback Shop. They showed up here a couple of months before that, and they went through all the complaints that we filed, and they were trying to determine. I mean, because I didn't even think about this, but at the federal level, when they're looking at all these complaints that are coming in, they were seeing that the majority of these complaints were coming from rural America. And so they thought maybe we had a discrimination rural versus urban, which it wasn't a rural versus urban. It was because SKIL is located in a rural community, in
right.
rural communities and rural, rural Kansas. So those complaints came from, the majority of them came from rural Kansas, but they had to come and determine what kind of complaint they were looking at for sure. Not, were they looking at just the waiting list, or were they looking at discrimination based on, where people lived? And I never thought about that when we were working on these complaints at all, that they might look at it that way. But when they came down and they realized it wasn't a rural versus urban issue, it was just because of where we were located,
Mhm.
then that's when they went ahead and went back to DC and calibrated their plan to come and anyway, come back to Kansas. And when they got here, they went straight to Brownback. They went straight to the governor somehow. Um, and I don't know if that's normally how it works, because we filed complaints about with them on different communities when they were out of compliance. And we've seen them come and work with that community to help them become in compliance.
Mhm.
And so, the Department of Justice works in their own ways. I mean, right now, I would say they're pretty busy dealing with some political things that are happening,
Right, right.
because they have all these, anyway, all these cases, and trying to figure out how to not make it political. So I don't know, but I think that here's what I know about advocacy: if you don't start, it will never happen.
Right, right.
So it is time for us to file complaints again. And I will pay my SKIL employees to help somebody. I don't care where they live in the state. They want to file a complaint because they are going to be on the waiting list forever, or because they have already been on the waiting list forever. And they're, in my opinion, the state is not meeting the obligation they have to meet people's health and safety once they've done that assessment and said this person needs this service. Um, they're basically then saying you're on a wait list, so you can either go into an institution, because now we say you qualify for that, and get
Right.
those services, or you can wait without services in the community. That's what the complaint is. The complaint is because it's not equal, and it's supposed to be equality between the institutional side and the least restrictive environment.
Right, right.
So we're never going to see a change unless we either suddenly get the legislation to give us the money to clean up the waiting list, or to make it a reasonable waiting list at least, and have a plan in place so that it doesn't just grow again out of control. Or we file Olmsted complaints and we force the state to do that, to do something, just like when education filed complaints about the funding. If that had not happened, there wouldn't be an ongoing, evaluation of the funding for education. It took a lawsuit, and that's advocacy. And not all advocacy has to go that far. But at some point, you got to go, enough is enough. And what's the next step that we need to do? And meanwhile, you can do multiple things at the same time. I mean, I think that our plan in the IL side has been to educate legislators all year long, and then have a really big push during the session to support funding for waiting list. At the same time, we're working with, KU on their waitlist study that they're doing to try to help come up and create a better plan, and looking at how other states are handling these issues. So, I mean, we kind of do it all at the same time. The piece I think that's missing right now is, in fact, the systems advocacy of filing those complaints against the state and forcing the state's hand to develop an Olmstead plan. They've got to have a plan so the waiting lists don't grow like this. So, we had a PD waiting list for a long time, and they called it a rolling waiting list, and people were never supposed to be on there for longer than 2 years. And then they started exceeding 2 years. And anyway, we did eventually eliminate that waiting list. But over time, because there was no plan to make sure that it didn't develop again, here we are, and here it is again. And I don't even think that the number of people being served currently, and I wish I had this data, I don't have it in front of me, but last I looked at the data, last time anybody, showed me the data, we still were not serving as many people today currently as we were serving during the Sebelius administration. Brownback cut back on the number of people getting served and the money going into those programs. So the number of people have never grown back to where it was. So that's probably part of the why there's a waiting list. And then they kind of quit being able to track people on the waiting list. So that kind of also caused a dilemma, allowing the numbers to shrink on number of people receiving services. So there's a lot of factors that happen during some very dark political times. But the reality is that we as advocates have to continue to fight the battle. And we cannot accept the status quo as okay and allow the system to neglect our brothers and sisters, people
Right.
that don't realize that they can fight it. They think it's just the way it is, and that's sad.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And it pisses me off. It
Okay.
puts fire in my belly. It makes me want
I
to
know. I know it does.
So I hope it does other people. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just one issue. There's many issues, but that's one that I
Yeah.
could go on about because it just makes me mad to know that people are going without, and people would rather die waiting for services than go in an institution. So hope that answers your question, Colin.
It does. It does.
Does it
It's
motivate
all
you to want to contact your friends and say, hey, just call an
well.
independent living center and they'll
Yes.
file
Yes.
for you?
Well, I talk to you. I think on a weekly basis at least.
Yeah.
Or I hear from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know your passion.
Yep. Is there any other questions out there?
Yeah, we had a question in the Q&A. Jacqueline asked, can you explain what bureaucratic means?
Oh, sure. The bureaucratic system, and I think, gosh darn it, they're everywhere. But when I'm referring to the bureaucratic system, I'm referring to the departments within the government. So KDADS, DCF, KDHE, Department of Housing. Those are, the bureaucratic pieces of government where they're not elected officials. Usually they're ran by an appointed secretary and then hired personnel to basically to implement the policies and the programs that the state offers. So those are the bureaucratic systems that I'm talking about. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. And then, yeah, Jacqueline, please feel free to raise your hand if there's any more clarification that you'd like. And then I can switch back to the slides as well, and we can continue going from this.
So what does advocacy mean when it comes to independent living? I think the little poster on the side, it is in a fuchsia pink box, and then a little poster of a lady and who is a wheelchair user. Looks like she's a double amputee. She's holding a sign. And it said, fix the system, not me. And I think that's what independent living is supposed to do. It's a federal mandate as one of our core services. And I would say it's probably the most important of the core services. I think they're all very important, don't get me wrong, but I think this is the most important because it is really the heart and soul of how independent living came to be. When you hear the stories about how independent living, how the fight for independent living came into play, it was about advocacy. It was about self-advocacy. When Ed Roberts, was denied an education and then overcame that. And then when he went to voc rehab and he asked for services and he was denied because he was too severely disabled. And he ended up becoming the director of voc rehab. And then that happened over again and over again in other states with other individuals because Ed led the way, but it was advocacy. And then he's seen how the system treated people with disabilities, and they developed the rolling quads, and which then ended up becoming Berkeley Independent Living Center, the first independent living center that came to be, and then it became part of the Rehab Act. And I mean, it just grew, but it was all advocacy that started it. So it's like who we are, and if we're not advocating, I'm not for sure we can call ourselves a center for independent living. In fact, I know we're not federally meeting the requirements. And then I think that sometimes we as centers for independent living need to be put in check by our customers. We're consumer controlled. And if we're not doing advocacy and we're not doing systems advocacy to make change continue, then we need to be called on it. We need to have somebody light that fire. We need a customer to come in and say, hey, this system is broke and it is, it needs to be fixed, and this is how it's affecting me. And, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to help me? And people need to step up. They need to get their fire lit and they need to step up. And centers need to make sure that advocacy is happening within and without. I mean, we need to empower others. When we're lit up, when we're passionate about something, then we're going to light that passion to other people. And we can build an advocacy. And, advocacy, it's not that it can't happen with one person, but we are so much more powerful when we are working together. When we are a lot of little fish taking on a big fish, we have so much more power. And so it's important. Light that fire. Find those fish. Go become that shark that needs to take on the system and change it. And we can do it. We've seen it happen. Over the 30 years, I have watched some amazing things, but I look at the history and I see all the things that happened before me. It's so exciting. And I want to be a piece of change in history. I mean, every day I wake up and I hope today I see where I've made a difference in the world. I hope that I was a piece of a change that made a difference in the world. And advocacy is that passion, that drive. And then we as independent living centers need to have that. We are across the state. We say that we serve the majority of the state with IL. That means there's nowhere that advocacy shouldn't be happening. There is nowhere we shouldn't be setting the example of systems change. There's nowhere we should be letting an individual who is asking for help on an issue go without services, go without that help. And you know what? We don't have to do it alone either. We are a network of centers for independent living. We can reach out to one another. If somebody's got they just really have a really great advocate when it comes to housing. It's okay for my staff to reach out to that center and say, hey, I need help with housing. I got some advocacy issues and I need some assistance. We're going to share with one another. We're going to help. We are all the fish in the bowl. I mean, all of us together, the customers, individuals, the citizens, and the center. So we should be working together. We should be sharing our knowledge and making systems change happen. And if anybody out there doesn't see that happening within independent living, let your voice be heard, because make it happen. We are consumer controlled, so make it happen. And, I hope I make it happen here every day. When I end a meeting with my staff, which, first of all, I hate meetings. I like to be out there watching the stuff happen. I want to be a part of it. I want my hands dirty. I want to be in the action. But every once in a while, you got a group and you got to, get everybody on the same page. But when I end a meeting, I say, go change the world. Go change the world today. And I don't care what position somebody has here. I hope that they're changing the world, even if it's just one person at a time, one issue at a time, one system at a time. Go change the world. And that's what I think we need to do. We all need to strive. How am I changing the world today? And I don't mean the whole global world. When you change the world for one freaking person today and you make it better, then you know what? You changed the world. One person at a time. We can do that. One system at a time, one policy at a time, one law at a time. We can change the world. And we just got to believe that in our souls. And if we believe that in our souls, then we can make it happen. If we realize we're being funded to do that, how freaking lucky are we that the federal government, because of people like Ed Roberts and Justin Dart and, all the fathers that came before us and the sisters that came before us, I mean, all those people, and then the people that are among us that also have had that power, and we've seen them make changes and movements. Kansas has been a leader in the independent living movement for decades, and there's no reason that should stop. There's no reason. I'm so very proud to be, have Luann Kibbe be a part of SKIL and be, part of our family at SKIL, and to be a Kansan, because she has been through the fight and she has been part of the systems changes, made things happen. And that empowers me. I want to be that person too. I want to do that. I want to, learn from her, and I want to follow her, and I want to lead when she tells me to lead, and I want to lead when if she's not around. And I want to make systems change happen. And just getting that issue that lights your fire, making a difference. When I get a phone call and, and I have somebody, I'll give you one of the cases I'm working on right now. One of the customer issues that I'm working on. I hate calling them cases, but one of the things I'm working on is I had a call from a mom who has had her son. He's 18 years old, and he was on the TA waiver, and they had a hard time getting services through the TA waiver in rural America. And so they ended up going off the TA waiver, and rather than rolling onto the IDD waiver, somehow the ball got dropped. They didn't even realize it happened. So dads just stayed home and taking care of their son. He was in special education and ended up having, difficulties with having nurses at the school to be able to be there. So he ended up having homeschooling happening. So basically, he's been at home with his mom and dad. And dad doesn't work outside the home anymore. Dad stayed at home with him. So after he turned 18, then some things changed with his can care. I don't know why. But he didn't have a case manager or an advocate working with him to help them. And so they changed the amount of formula that they were able to get through their insurance. So being a one income family with this need, his intake of nutrition decreased. So he started losing weight. So then when he got sick and he went to the doctor and they ended up hospitalizing him, dad informed him of what was going on and how come he had this weight loss. And he ended up, I don't know what the medical condition was, because that isn't what I'm working on, but he ended up being transferred up to Kansas City to a hospital, who then looked at the weight loss and decided they needed to open up an APS investigation. So boom, then when he was ready to get out of the hospital, he's nonverbal. he is his own guardian because, again, this family, it was mom and dad. They didn't realize they needed to establish guardianship. No way to have done that, financially, and no one to help them through a process because, again, they didn't have any tie to services any longer. So, in the great wisdom of the state, because there was an investigation, they took the kiddo and they placed him somewhere. And they didn't tell the parents where he was because they didn't have a release, because he's not capable of signing one or communicating that it's okay to tell mom and dad where I'm at. So now I have parents who then went through the investigation. It was non-substantiated. Still, they don't know where their child is. The child who is nonverbal has gone through the holidays and has continued to live somewhere in the Kansas City area without any idea what happened to his mom and dad. So this is a broken system. So I'm advocating for them, and that fills my heart. I'm going to make a difference, I hope, within a system that is obviously broken, but also in recognizing how the system has failed this family. I'm going to help advocate to get systems in place and to hopefully get this young man back home, and to make sure that, there aren't putting a guardian in place that doesn't know the system, that's going to be just whatever. That's fine. Just let it happen. I mean, so somebody needs to look at the big picture, and they need to have a guardian that's willing to do that if they're going to establish guardianship for this kiddo. And then they need to really look at this kiddo and figure out what services he needs and what level of guardianship he needs. And anyway, so my advocacy is hopefully going to make a difference. And so I know that every day I'm working to change the world for this family. And that makes me one of the luckiest people in the world, because I get to go to work and get paid for changing the world and making it a better place. So I think that's what independent living should be doing. Meeting the needs that come in through the phones or through the doors of our offices of individuals. And at the same time, being very passionate about the things that we see, the roadblocks that affect the mass group of people with disabilities, whether it be related to just one population or across all disabilities. We need to remember independent living serves birth to death and all types of disabilities. So our advocacy should look the same. Next slide. Or any questions? Any comments?
Not seeing any hand raises or questions in the Q&A, but please do, as Shari mentioned, feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question or make a comment, and please feel free to type it in the chat if that works better.
Okay.
All right, I don't see anything, so we can continue with the slides.
So advocacy efforts, this is skill in action. So advocacy efforts. So we work with, and as Colin said, we seem like we're on calls together all the time because we're working on lots of different advocacy issues, but developing our advocacy agenda. I mean, right now, SKIL is working on many advocacy issues. Biggest being, obviously, we're trying to get Medicaid expansion. We're trying to support the governor in her efforts. I'm so excited to see that she's taken this to one of her top priorities. So we've been working with different groups and the governor's office, as they've gone around and done town hall meetings and met with hospitals and different folks to talk about Medicaid expansion and what it means in our state, and how not having it is affecting our state and our medical facilities and services, especially in rural areas where we've seen multiple hospitals shut down. We've had 3 in Southeast Kansas that have closed, and that Medicaid expansion may have been able to have saved. A hospital in a rural community is pretty darn important. Sometimes, I mean, it makes a difference whether a person lives and dies many times. So having our facilities closed has been terrifying. And watching medical providers leave our communities to go to, and we're on the border, so we have Oklahoma and Missouri right there next to us down here in Southeast Kansas, and both of them have expanded Medicaid. So it's an issue because healthcare providers are getting paid better across the border. So for a 30-minute drive, a nurse can go make more money. And they do. You know, they're humans, they have families to take care of too. So we've watched, you know, the shortage of nurses increase due to the fact that they can make better money, and doctors as well. So hospital doctors that work for the hospitals can go to work in Joplin or Bartlesville and make more money than they can in Southeast Kansas. And with Medicaid expansion, they've been able to have newer and better equipment to do better, to deliver better services. So people also choose to go across the border to get their services. So then that also affects our local facilities. Anyway, on and on. So that's a big issue for us. Medicaid expansion is extremely important to me for many different reasons on personal levels, but as well as a systems change, knowing that many of our personal care attendants go without insurance, and Medicaid expansion could in fact finally offer them a pathway to health insurance, making them healthier and better serving our customers, the people that we fight for every day, our brothers and sisters who need services. And that in-home care and that attendant becomes, a very the very tool that keeps them living independently. So for them to be healthier would be a huge asset. It also is personal for me because my sister has cancer and is a personal care attendant. She's a person with a disability that has worked as a personal care attendant and has not been able to get health insurance. So Medicaid expansion would allow her to get that. And about 4 years ago, she was diagnosed with cancer. And when I was taking her to get biopsies and those things done, the final meeting with the doctor was, he said, you need to have a much bigger facility to provide you the support you need. So you need to be going to Mayo Clinic or someplace like that. And as soon as you get health insurance, come back and we'll develop a plan. And that meant you're going to die without health insurance. And because you aren't poor enough to qualify for Medicaid, and you're not wealthy enough to find insurance that would meet your needs with the pre-existing conditions that you have, you're going to die. And that made it personal to me because of Medicaid expansion, she would have insurance and she would have a treatment plan and she would have the right to fight for her life that other people are making not possible for her. Anyway, so that becomes very personal and they get very passionate when it comes to Medicaid expansion. We're of course, we're fighting for the waiting list, funding for the waiting list, get people off the waiting list. The time that people are on the waiting list is not acceptable. So we're fighting for that advocacy effort individually, as well as a system and with a legislative body to increase funding. We've continued to fight for rate parity. Another thing we found with the shortage of DSWs is that without rate parity and without people getting paid the same amount for the same service, regardless of the disability, the label, that certain populations have a harder time finding workers because they want to get paid the maximum they can get paid. So that's a huge issue. And so we're going to fight for rate parity. And I really think it's just figuring out how to get legislators to understand that. It's not a political thing. It's just a real thing. So we're going to continue to work for that. And then, of course, we're going to work on Kathy's Law. We're going to work on supporting, the decision-making guardianship stuff, assisted decision-making in lieu of guardianship. So we're going to work on trying to get those things done. And we're going to work for funding for independent living because there hasn't been increases in funding for independent living to keep up with the cost of living, let alone what the federal study showed the base funding should be for independent living. In Kansas, we're extremely underfunded in IL, and we've not gone out and fought for that for ourselves until last year when we started putting together the effort to do that. So those are kind of our priorities. We're also going to be keeping an eye and fighting for some issues that are happening with foster care that affect people with disabilities. In fact, there's just some stupid policy changes that are happening for people who are on the IDD waiver and in foster care. And so we're going to be, working on that, and hopefully that doesn't become a legislative issue. We can just deal with that within the bureaucratic system, but I don't know. We'll find out. Just so many things to fight for, so many things to focus on and to watch and to see what's going on. And, it can't be done alone. It can't be done alone. It can't be done by a small group. We need a large group of people who are willing to fight and to advocate and to make systems change happen and to speak up for themselves. So we identify what systems are broken. So, we got to light those fires. We got to educate people. We got to empower people. We got to raise the bar for ourselves, the expectation that we won't accept the status quo. I'm involved with the National Adapt because I think that there are many styles of advocacy. So, that's kind of the extreme. So I think sometimes advocacy just starts with education, letting people know what's happening, looking at that scenario of why something isn't working. And maybe it works for some, but it's not working for all. And if it's not working for all, then we need to figure out what it is that's broken. What do we need to fix, and educate. But when that doesn't work, then we need to turn up the heat and take it to the next level. And that's when we need to get more people involved. We need to either make phone calls or write letters to turn up the heat on a situation so that that system can change. And I'm still in turn up the heat from our self-advocates here in Kansas, but they're right. You got to turn up the heat on an issue. And so then you turn it up another notch when you don't see the changes and you get a lot of lip service. We're going to look at that. We're going to set up a committee. We're going to, okay, fine, give them a chance to do that. But when that doesn't happen, or when that is not moving in the direction that it initially was started out to look to, that was what we were doing. And by the time somebody was given the assignment to put it into action to develop a work group, it's no longer looks like what we were fighting for in the first place. Well, then turn up the heat. Let your voice be heard. Get pissed off a little more. Share that information and that heat and that passion and that feeling of being angry about a system. Share that with your brothers and sisters so that more people are pissed about it. Get people to join that effort. And then, you take it to the next level. You develop a plan. You take it to the legislation. And if that doesn't help, if that doesn't work, then you need to take it to the next level. Maybe you need to file a lawsuit. Maybe we need to be talking to DRC about it and seeing if we, need to figure out, file a lawsuit. And we've done that. And the world didn't end. You know what happened when we filed a lawsuit? We got curb cuts. We got a system in place. So if somebody identifies an area that needs a curb cut put in, the city has a plan that they have to follow. That was negotiated in the lawsuit settlement. And we have an advocacy place to go if that doesn't happen. We can go to that lawsuit and say, hey, this was the agreement. And if they continue to ignore that, we go make a petition again with the court to force the city to follow the Americans with Disabilities Act. I mean, pretty much it's that simple. The world didn't end. Was the city pissed at us at first? Sure. It's okay. Advocacy is agitation. Sometimes people are going to get irritated. People don't like to change. People don't like to be told what to do. But if people aren't doing the right thing, somebody's got to tell them. Somebody's got to step up. Somebody's got to take the heat and raise it. So we've done that.
And Shari,
Mhm.
speaking of issues to fight for, we did get a question from one of our attendees asked, Lisa from SAC would like to know what your opinion on sub-minimum wage is.
Well, how the hell did that ever start? That's what I want to know. What? What? I mean, so we've taken a population and we said, you're not worthy of getting paid like everybody else. You can put in the time, but we aren't going to pay you that way. We'll give you something. We're going to pat you on the head and say, that boy, here's 6 cents. What the hell are you going to do with that? You got a piggy bank? I mean, want to hear it jingle jingle because that's all it's worth, right? That's bullshit. How did that ever start? I don't know, but I'll tell you this. It's about time that we do more than say it's not okay. It's about time to turn up the heat. It's about time to say in the state of Kansas, we're going to sue you if you continue to allow that to happen. Because we've done everything else. You know, we have been fighting at the federal level to eliminate that right, to take that out of the Department of Labor, to even make that a possibility. And I think we have a lot of support because it just doesn't make sense. I don't know when it did. I don't know when it started. I don't know when it made sense, but it sure the hell doesn't make sense now. I just think it's ferocious. I think people are equal and that if somebody works, they need to get paid just like everybody else. Now, I don't pay everybody in my office the same because it does depend on the job that they do. And it does depend on how well they do it. But there's a baseline and everybody gets that. Everybody that works gets that baseline or above. And that is all we're asking for. Just eliminate that. That is so stupid. So that's my opinion. And I probably could talk with much harsher words about it because it really does piss me off. Any other questions? Anything else you want to see? If it lights my fire?
Yeah, please answer. I'm going to stop sharing so I can make sure that no one's hands are raised, but yeah, please do speak up if you want to ask Shari anything. All right,
hey.
I'm not seeing anything. So let me transition to the next slide, which looks to be like a lot of pictures that you can describe for us, Shari.
A lot of pictures and, you know, describing them all is a lot, but this is people in action. So it is different protests that we have been involved in here in SKIL. There is one that is more of a cartoon, which our own Daniel is one of my staff, and he is a graphic designer, and he has put together lots of different things for us. And so this is Advocacy Coalition for Kansas conference brochure that was put together. And so that's showing 2 young people in action with flyers. One is in a wheelchair, and the other is a gentleman who's wearing glasses and holding a bunch of flyers. There are pictures of U.S. Congressman Jerry Moran's office with holding signs about Medicaid cuts costing lives. There's a picture of a march where we are marching to do protest on housing to the Department of Housing in Washington, D.C. There's a picture of many of us outside the Department of Housing carrying big, giant inflatable hammers that say justice on them. There's a picture of us outside the Capitol where we were fighting for Medicaid expansion here in Kansas. There's a picture of us at the governor's meeting. So there are many people sitting in rows of chairs, just showing a diverse crowd, all there to support diversity, the diversity supporting Medicaid expansion and to support that governor. And then there's a picture of a big sign that says accessible, affordable, integrated housing. And that is from when we went to Washington, D.C. and participated in National Adapt efforts, and where I had my first federal arrest, which was very exciting. And for many years, when my children were young, I participated in those advocacy efforts, and I went to several ADAPT actions, which is a national group that fights for the rights of people with disabilities and national issues. And but I never would get arrested. Now I'm a grandma, and I guess I just decided it was time for me to put my money where my mouth was. And if there's an issue that's worth fighting for, it's worth fighting for all the way. And so I actually got arrested in Kansas first, when I was protesting for Medicaid expansion right before the pandemic. And then I got arrested again in DC when I was fighting for accessible, affordable housing at the Speaker of the House's office. And both were wonderful experiences that make me proud to know I'm willing to go the distance, and that I can lead the way and show you that, you aren't a criminal when you're fighting for a cause. A cause we're fighting for is a cause we're fighting for. And so I'm willing to go all the way. It doesn't mean everybody is. There's lots of different reasons why people, don't go that far, but that doesn't mean they don't have to be involved. And in fact, they do need to be involved. Everybody needs to be involved in what affects our lives every day. And, even if it's, it's an election year. And I tell people all the time, you have to vote. You have to understand the largest voting bloc in the United States is the disability voting bloc, because it crosses over into every other voting bloc. Women are people with disabilities as well. There are definitely people with disabilities that are women. There are definitely people with disabilities who are male. There are definitely people with disabilities who are Black. There are definitely people with disabilities who are Asian. There's definitely people with disabilities who are, it just goes on and on. We are the largest voting bloc in the United States. We have to, each and every one of us, go out and cast our vote, and cast our votes for people who we know, and they're just people. These politicians are just people, but they're people with opinions. And do those opinions and do their actions reflect what is important to you? Do they stand for the things that mean the most to you? And that's who you need to vote for. But that takes some work on your part to find that out, to get involved, to send questions to those candidates, to find out how are they going to respond to accessible, integrated, affordable housing. Are they going to fund that? Are they going to understand the importance of people can't live in the community without accessible, affordable, integrated housing, and what it takes to get that? The folks that are being elected in Kansas, we know Medicaid expansion hasn't happened because of the people in our Senate haven't held the president of the Senate accountable for letting that go to a vote. What are we doing about it? Are the folks in Sedgwick County just doing nothing? They're just going to let her continue to get elected term after term? Well, that's what's happening. They need to be pissed off about it. They need to show up to the polls. They need to let her know this year, if she doesn't allow a Medicaid expansion to pass to the Senate, or at least get a damn vote in the Senate, then we're going to work to get her out of office. I mean, that's up to us, right? It's up to our brothers and sisters in Sedgwick County. It's up to us to hold our legislators in the Senate accountable, to hold her accountable. And if they're not willing to step up to the Senate president and say, let it through a vote, they're not allowed to develop a caucus to go to them and put the pressure on them and the leadership, then they don't need to be there. They don't have the kahunas to do the job. They're not representing the people. They're not representing my people. So we need to make sure that we're holding these people accountable. Advocacy happens at so many levels and at so many places. And it happens when we work together, when we are the largest voting bloc. We make a difference. We can decide who's governor in our state. We can decide who's elected officials in our state. We decide who's the elected officials in our community. If we collectively come together and we work on those issues together, collectively, we can make a difference in the world every single day. Every single day. Election years just happens to be a big time when we can do that. And people need to remember, hey, when we're having our rallies out here outside of SKIL, we have a big rally every year. And then we have a huge party at the end of the year. So at both of those times, when I have lots of people around and I have legislators present, I make sure they understand that we are the largest voting bloc in this state and that our issues are important, and they better listen to our issues or we're going to vote them out. That's the way it works. And I let the candidates know that that's how they get elected, is to listen to our issues and not just listen and give us lip service. We want to see action. We want to see part of your, your difference that you make in this position needs to be focused on disability issues. Anyway, so I think that we all have a part, and we all need to find where our comfort zone is, and we need to start there. But then we need to light our fire and take the next step, take it to the next level, go up, push, get other people involved, hold people accountable, do advocacy at all the levels that are necessary. Find out who's doing that. Find out who's going to track the state legislation that's going to affect Kansas. Who's going to track that this year? Luann's out. She's tracked it now for, decades for us. And Luann is sick, so she won't be tracking that this year. Who's going to do it? Who's stepping up? Who's got the time? Whose boss is going to say, yeah, you can do that? I'm not for sure. Maybe somebody on this call is going to step up and say, you know what? There's a hole and I need to fill it. I'm willing to fill it. I think that there are lots of great groups. There's SAC, there's CAN, there's the Big Tent, there's, on and on, the Mental Health Coalition. There's all these different groups, and they all have important issues that we need to advocate for together as a movement. And I think who helps pull us all together? Who lets us know what piece of legislation you're fighting for, or what are you fighting for within, systems change, whatever, so that we can all work together. But we've got to figure out how to communicate. And it takes each one of us doing our part to make that happen. And I think that all the levels of advocacy, whether from the ground up, I like having my feet on the ground. I like to get my hands dirty. I like to get right out there and make sure that system changes are happening. I am not a bureaucrat. I am not the person at the top is pointing down. That's not who I am. It's no, I've never been. I'm not saying there don't need to be people like that. It's not me. I want to be involved. I want to make sure the system change is happening. I want to meet with my legislators. I want to talk to customer groups. I want to make sure that people are empowered to know that we can change the system. That's why I agreed to do this training. That's why I agreed to go and talk to high school kids last week. I mean, that's why I did a presentation with a group of community members last week. It's because I know people need to understand that it takes all of us working together. People with disabilities cross every other population. All of us have issues that we need to fight and change to make the world more accessible and more adapted to us and our needs. We only know that when we're working together. And all of us can do something. We can tell our story. We can write it down. We can email a legislator. We can write a letter. We can sign a postcard. We can, we can show up to a rally. We can take our issues and find other people who are similar to raise that issue, to put the heat under that issue. We can join a coalition that already exists. We can start a new coalition, whatever. I just hope people understand it. You are the change. It is up to you. You can't sit on the sideline and let other people do it. That's not the way this works. It's all of us working together at some level, all of us coming together to make the system change. We have to have our voices be heard. We have to change the system, because you know what? If we do nothing today, nothing will be done tomorrow. And it'll be the same. And is the same okay? Are we really okay with the status quo? Is things just going right for our brothers and sisters? We all going to sit back and just let that waiting list? We're going to let people wait for 7 to 10 years and, maybe die or end up in an institution? No. Are we going to let people die because they don't have insurance, because our state is letting $8 billion go back to the federal government because of political reasons? Because this is a political issue. It's not about what's right for the Kansans. Are we going to sit back and let that happen? I don't think so. I don't think that's who we are. I don't think that's how we're made as humans, to sit back and watch people suffer because, we don't have the time, we don't have the energy. It's not my job. Somebody else should do it. No, it is our job. It's each and every one of us' job to change the system, to not allow the status quo to continue, to identify the issues, to stand up for our brothers and sisters, to empower our brothers and sisters to stand up for themselves. That's what we need to do. That's who we are. And that's what advocacy is. And I hope that you feel it. I hope that you get a little pissed when you see something wrong and you do something about it. It lights your fire. It's a match. Light that fire. Spread that fire. Ignite the system change. And that's pretty much all I have. So, any questions, any comments? Anybody pissed enough to bring me some issues so we can go change the world together?
This is great, Shari. Yeah, well, please do. Anyone raise your hand. This has been such a wonderful presentation. Or drop your question in the Q&A. I'll keep kind of monitoring that. But what great motivation to go change the world, as Shari says. I'm gonna write that down and put it on my desk.
One person at a time, one person at a time, one system at a time. And we Kansas Adapt had kind of died. So if anybody's interested in getting involved in Adapt, we are trying to get that started back up. We have a small group that's gone to a couple national actions again. So you can send me an email and I'll get you connected to the people who are trying to keep that organized and get that going. SKIL's going to be.
It looks like Heather Jones raised their hand. Heather, I'm going to allow you to talk. Heather, you're able to talk if you would like. Oh, it looks like you're muted. I'll ask to unmute you.
Still muted.
Still muted, Heather, if you're talking, but yeah. Or if anyone else wants to kind of ask a question.
Heather, you need to just go down in the corner, down in the left-hand corner and push the microphone to unmute yourself.
Oh, Heather said, I did not mean
to. Oh, darn it, Heather. I was excited.
No worries. Oh, here we go. Suzanne asks, this is the first time I'm hearing about This is the first time I'm hearing about waiting list advocacy, and I would like more information on how to assist my consumers. I have several on a PD waiting list that have been on the list for over a year. They just need some supports to stay in their home.
So I think that a couple of things need to happen. First of all, you need to empower them, light their fire, to say, hey, this isn't okay for you to be waiting. Are you willing to tell your story? And let's get it to the legislators so they hear that story. Simple email to the legislators. If they can't do it, then you do it on their behalf and just say, I have this customer. She's granted me permission to tell her story, and she's on the waiting list and she's at risk of going to institution, blah, 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 blah. Tell the story so the legislators understand it from a personal perspective. I think sometimes that's all we have to do is get it so we touch their human heartstring and say, boom, it's an issue that affects your constituents and at such a basic level, just get them to give a shit, and then that open the expand the ability to start that movement. And then they can also be involved in whatever advocacy efforts that we're going to be doing, when there's a hearing, the Bob Bethel committee or whatever, they can sign in from their home and listen to that hearing so that legislators can see that. They can submit written testimony where they write their story up and send it to the whole committee. That's all they have to do, is just tell their story. Is why do they need to, why does the funding need to happen for the waiting list? Why is it okay? It's not okay. And they tell that story. They can file an Olmsted complaint. And if they don't know how, and you don't know how to assist them in doing that, then you give me a call. I'll have staff come and we will, do a training. We'll record a training, send it to you so you can share it with other folks, and on how to fill out an Olmsted complaint. And we can start issuing Olmsted complaints right out of your office. It's simple. It's really just not that hard. It's basically, again, just telling their story and putting it in a complaint that it's not okay that they're waiting for services, because they could go to an institution today and get their services they need. And that is discrimination. And it's just not allowed under the ADA.
All
Did
right,
that
it
help
looks like
answer your question?
Chelsea.
Okay.
Yeah, please feel free to raise your hand if you would like more clarification. But Chelsea Rose raised their hand, so I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Hi, this is Chelsea, and we're talking about self-advocacy here. And I've been helping a consumer since like the beginning of November to get her CanCare and get HCBS services turned back on, because she never did receive her CanCare renewal notices or anything like that. And we've been fighting, and today I just been shown that she's got everything turned back on.
You got to celebrate those victories. That is amazing. And you made a difference in that girl's life.
And she doesn't know about this yet. So, but it's just like, and we're going back to paying her HCBS worker who has never quit working.
Oh my
But
gosh.
has been very kind to continue to work.
Yes.
And so when we meet, this is good news. We're talking about self-advocacy. We're calling up CanCare Bodesman, and the consumer wanted to know if they should call the governor up. And I'm like, you go for it, girl.
Yeah,
do what you want to
absolutely.
do. But
It's self-empowerment. I mean,
your
good job,
services,
Chelsea.
get involved, get active.
Good job. Good job. Celebrate, man. Celebrate. You are
That's
a
what we're gonna do
hero.
today.
You are a hero. And I am so proud of you. And that DSW that kept working, man, if you can find a way to recognize that person, that's amazing too, because good DSWs right now, there's a shortage of DSWs, good, bad, or indifferent. So that's amazing that she stuck with it, and good for her too. But congratulations. Yay. Nothing's better than a victory.
Thank you.
So I guess we don't have much time, but I've talked about, getting angry, lighting that fire, getting passionate about something. So just as we're ending, just, take a little notepad out and just write down the things that really piss you off that you see, either in your individual life or in your work life, through the systems. Just write down some of those things. And then let's look for the advocacy efforts that are being made to help change that system. Chelsea just talked about, when they suddenly started doing Medicaid applications and how many people's applications never got to them. So they lost their Medicaid services, and the extra work that we've had to do to help advocate for those people. And then you worry about the people that we don't even know about that didn't reach out to help it, to get help from us, because maybe they weren't already receiving HCBS service. They just had straight Medicaid, and, they're lost. I mean, that's not okay. What are we doing about that? And we have been doing a lot about that, and I hope that we're catching the majority of those folks, and the system has been really great to work with as far as, allowing things to be backdated and, taking those things into consideration. Those things have happened. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's happening. But let's make sure our customers know, and that we're getting that information out there. But whatever it is, make that list. It doesn't have to be a long list, but make the list. Find out if there's other people that are fighting for those issues, and where you can get involved in those issues that are important to you. I just think that we each and every one have to do that. And I hope that we realize we can make a change in somebody's life. We can make a change in our own life. We can make the world a better place. We can make Kansas a better place. We can make the nation a better place. And we can set examples for the people with disabilities across across the world. And when we do, people from international, I mean, they watch what's happening in America. They watch what's happening with the advocates. They watch what happens in the disability world. So let's be that change. Let's do it. I hope that that's why you joined this training, because you want to, these caucus efforts have been all about, just getting involved in advocacy and realizing that each and every one of us have that power and that we can empower everybody around us as well. And then it is an election year. So gosh, more important than ever to get involved and make sure people understand the importance of their vote, to make sure people are empowered in changing the world and keeping the world on a course that, is going to be what's best for people with disabilities. Anyway, and people don't realize that we're the largest voting bloc in the US. So let's tell them. Let's tell them they're a part of a very large group, a very powerful group if we come together. And I've enjoyed 30 years of it. So, hey, again, I look in the mirror and think you're one of the luckiest damn people I know. You've got to work. Because I did this before. I worked for independent living. I worked in another system and started to put that in my bio. And I thought, oh gosh, people don't care. Most people that'll be listening probably weren't even born back then. So, but I've been doing this for a long time. I grew up with a learning disability, and back in the 70s and early 80s, they really didn't know how to work with me. I was put in a Title I program. They met their quotas, and then they sent me into high school with no supports. And I went on to college again with no supports other than the skills I developed on my own on how to survive. And it wasn't until I became, an employee of an independent living center, when I met my brothers and sisters that talked about disability pride and disability empowerment, that I realized that it was okay to just be me. And in fact, I should brag about what I've accomplished with my learning disability. And then I should ignite the fire and the passion within to change the world, so others can learn from my experience and I can learn from others' experiences. So anyway, I'm a person with a disability. I'm proud, and I'm changing the world every day the best I can. Maybe it's just for one person. Maybe it's for more. I am.
This is great,
Yeah, we're
Shari.
done.
Yeah. Well, I think we're right at time. And so thank you so much just for your participation and for everyone who attended this webinar today. We just appreciate you all very much. And thank you again to our sponsor, CareSource. We couldn't have done these webinars without them. So really appreciative of that. And so I think that wraps things up. And yeah, I think we can all leave and be inspired to go change the world. All right.
Get pissed off
Thank
and do
you
it.
all.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.